tuned into Quick Charge, the high voltage podcast bringing you the top stories in electric vehicles and sustainable energy daily. And it's all powered by electric. Welcome to today's episode of Quick Charge. It's June 12th, and I'm your host, Joe Boris. Today, we're starting off with more news out of Tesla. Tesla says it has 2 Optimus humanoid robots working autonomously in its factories. In its latest tweet, the company listed a rundown of the company's accomplishments, quote, under Elon Musk's leadership since 2018. We already knew about most of those, except for the very last thing listed: deployed 2 Optimus bots performing tasks in the factory autonomously. Now, this is incredibly interesting because not only would that be major news in the field of robotics and also something that I think a lot of Tesla fans would be really excited about, but it's also worth noting that it's weird that it was never tweeted about before, specifically because Elon does seem to be kind of addicted to tweeting about stuff. Some of it real, some of it imagined. At the end of the day, 45,600 posts since joining in June 2009. I did some quick math here. That's 5,460 days, give or take. And that's more than 8 tweets per day, every day. Now, keep in mind that doesn't keep an ongoing log of deleted tweets, of which I'm sure there are several hundred. It also doesn't count his other accounts, including the one where he role plays as his own 3-year-old son, which is it's what you want your CEO to be doing. The top comment so far: amazing news that, quote, blows one's mind, but no video of the 2 bots performing the autonomous work. No details of costs, maintenance, or performance. Interesting to see the stock after opening. Now, we have seen Optimus robots before, and I'm not talking about the first time we ever saw it when it was just a guy in a suit. A lot of accusations have been out there about these being telecontrolled, where they're basically mimicking the movements of human operators. So for something like this to be quote unquote trained by a human operator and then perform that same repetitive task over and over again, that would still be a big leap. Whether or not that's something that they're calling autonomous remains to be seen. This autonomous label that's being attached to it, is it operating free of direct control, but still kind of doing a repetitive task that it's been previously trained on? Because if that's the case, GM's had robots doing that since the 80s. But hey, we're here to get excited. We're here to hype it up and pump the stock ahead of the votes. So that's really interesting stuff. Let us know what you think of that. Moving on from Tesla to one of its biggest rivals in the marketplace, BYD. The BYD Seal 06 GT leaks in China as a sporty new EV hatch poised for the EU market. Right there, you see a BYD Seal sedan. Now, this hatch version is interesting, right? Because it's supposed to be the first rear-wheel drive electric hot hatch. This is a really neat looking car. BYD, of course, has been building EVs now for a long time. They've been a major car maker in China, and they're currently the #1 seller of plug-in vehicles, if you count plug-in hybrid cars in the world, and seem poised to overtake Tesla as the #1 seller of pure battery electric vehicles as well. You probably also know about BYD as the first company to deploy a 48-volt vehicle platform all the way back in 2013. I found this article from Green Car Congress. At Auto Shanghai in 2013, BYD introduced its Green Hybrid Initiative, and among the technologies included in that effort was the use of a 48-volt VDC vehicle architecture platform. Similar to what we're seeing now in the Tesla Cybertruck, that 48-volt platform allowed for extended battery life, extended life of the car, transition to all LED lighting, advanced electronic parking systems, regenerative braking. It's all that good stuff. So this 48-volt thing has been around for a long time, and we fully expect to see it in the new BYD as well. And that 48-volt architecture is going to power a single motor model with about 215 horsepower, likely rear-wheel drive. Meanwhile, dual motor version features a more powerful 268 horsepower rear motor with an added 148 horsepower front motor. That's going to give us a choice of a 59.52 or 72.96 kilowatt hour battery packs, and between 314 or 376 miles on the Chinese range estimates. So that's exciting stuff. Be interesting to see what kind of dent that puts in Model 3 sales. And quite frankly, Polestar sales, Volkswagen ID4 sales. BYD makes a tremendous product. If you've ever gotten a chance to take a look at one firsthand, like I did at CES back in January, these are really well-built cars. They're put together nicely. They have good build quality. The interiors look great. There's no reason to believe these wouldn't do well in the US, even with aggressively protectionist tariffs in place. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in Europe and as well as Southeast Asia, Central and South America, and Australia. And as we look at the global EV market, it's important to note EV sales aren't lagging, they're headed for long term growth. This is a great article by Michelle Lewis that talks about EV sales continuing to grow despite a mixed near term outlook and kind of the immediate news articles that you're seeing that talk about EV sales being down, EV supplies being down, and that kind of thing. This is based on a report from Bloomberg NEF, and it depends on two key elements. The first one being that internal combustion sales have peaked. Internal combustion sales peaked in 2017 and are expected to be down nearly 30% from that peak by 2027. The second big factor is that electric heavy trucks have become economically viable for most use cases. Now, in this article, Bloomberg is saying that they will become economically viable by 2030, but that doesn't quite take into consideration all of the incentives, all of the fluctuation in the way that fleets actually manage themselves. If you're bidding out for a large commercial job and you have a margin of error of 1% to 2%, and you're looking at fuel costs 6 months or a year out, most of the time, what you're doing in order to insulate your budget and protect your budget's projections, you're buying fuel futures contracts. Now, sometimes the price of fuel goes up and you come out ahead. Sometimes it goes down. And then you're stuck paying higher than market price because you've bought those fuel futures, you've bought those contracts. The ability to insulate yourself and more accurately project your costs is one of the biggest reasons that large fleets are accelerating towards electrification, whether it's a construction fleet or an over the road semi fleet. You're starting to see more and more of that play out. I think the Bloomberg report here is a little bit behind the times, but let's look at it from what they are strictly talking about, which is the economics that we're going to be looking at for most use cases, which currently I will admit that there are a number of use cases where diesel is still probably the preferred way to go, the more cost effective way to go. But the idea that electric trucks will become economically viable for even those use cases by 2030, I think is really, really exciting. And one thing that I included here, you're looking out over my head here at the Statista report. This is unit sales of the Apple iPhone worldwide from '07 when the phone first launched to 2023. Now, the thing I really want to point out is in 2016, when iPhone sales dipped about 10% from 23 million to 210 million, there were a ton of articles saying iPhone is in decline. This is the end of Apple. Smartphone market has kind of hit its peak. And what you've seen since then is kind of steady growth and then a dip again in 2019 and then more growth in 2020, 2021, which was the most recent peak at 242 million. But you're starting to see that, 232, 231 million. That seems to be the right number where you're kind of hitting the natural limit of the market and only kind of increased population growth or some other demand driver is going to continue accelerating that. And I think that's what Michelle's trying to say here with this article is that we're not going to see that 50% growth, every quarter after quarter, year after year that we've seen in the early days of the EV transformation. But you are going to start to see a continued steady growth as more people begin to see these vehicles as practical, as more people have experience with them, as more people buy them and they enter that secondary market. They're going to become a bigger and bigger piece of the pie while internal combustion is going to continue to decline. So I don't think that's saying anything that we didn't already know, but it's always good to get that confirmation bias from someone as credible as Bloomberg, right? And then finally, we're going to close out today with Championship Electric Go-Karts. Championship Electric Go-Kart Racing is coming to the US this fall, and you can participate. Now, this is really exciting because this kind of go-kart racing, this is what I think most people who follow motorsports would say this is the path to IndyCar. This is the path to Indy Lights. This is the path to Formula One. All the Formula One champions of the last 40, 50 years have come up through karting. Go back into the 60s, John Surtees, you start talking about motorcycles and things like that. But that is the modern era. They're all driving go-karts. To have an internationally recognized championship in the US, especially for youth and adults, is supremely important for that feeder series for building up motorsports. And so it's great to see that. And the fact that they're doing it electric is really, really interesting. Now, these are 36 horsepower. They have a top speed of 78 miles an hour, nearly 80 miles an hour, 2 inches off the ground. Really exciting. Acceleration 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds. This is going to put them not quite in the same performance league as some of the shifter carts that you might be familiar with, two-stroke shifter carts, but it's definitely something more like a tag cart. So it's really exciting. It's kind of in between the tag carts and the shifters, but it's going to have that experience of getting in, touch and go, essentially hit the starter, drive it, no shifting involved. This is going to be really, really exciting. Participating racers will be behind the wheel of all electric racing go karts powered by Blue Shock's BSR X4 go kart power units. That's the company that is obviously behind these machines. And when we say participating racers, we mean anyone under 265 pounds. So if you're in your 50s and you want to show these young cats how it's done, definitely let's go racing. And I got to dust off my oil, man. I'll bring that to the races myself, and we'll get those going. So that's all I've got for today, June 12th. Obviously going to be more big news tomorrow. Stay tuned for that, and be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a minute of it.